family constellation therapy. I read out Kathy's story earlier on, one of your featured testimonials, which made for great reading. Absolutely superb. And family constellation work, it's probably best that you maybe give us a brief introduction and we can unpack and unfold that, and maybe with the help of people's questions via email as well. Rather than me doing a spiel, could you just give us a very brief introduction to family constellation therapy, and we'll work it up as we go along?
Okay. Well, it's I was just reading this morning, Hellinger described it as journeys to the core. And it's working with our ancestors and placing them in the room when you do your own constellation. And if you follow and watch what happens, they lead us to some obstacle that's in our past, something that perhaps was unresolved, something that has been sitting maybe as a burden in the lives, maybe not of our own, it could be the lives of a grandfather or a grandmother, something in the family tree or system that hasn't been properly digested.
Wow, so there's a few things already there that I'd like to discuss with you. Was it Hellinger or Hellinger that you mentioned there?
His name is Bert Hellinger, and he's German.
Hellinger, right. And he's the founder, is he, of Family Constellation?
He developed it from his work in Africa. He was working, he was actually a Jesuit priest, and he was working with the Zulus, and he noticed when something happened to one person in the tribe, then it didn't only stay with them.
Wow, it had an effect, it sort of rippled throughout the tribe and the family setup.
And even more strange is that he noticed that later generations were also affected by that event.
Wow.
So that sometimes, even if they didn't know what had happened, or even if they didn't know that person.
Right, that's extraordinary, isn't it? Now, people might be imagining that there's something of role play in there, because you were saying, people map out, act out your family constellation with you in a room. So we might have a look at that, how that works, I think. But also, you mentioned about, how unresolved issues can be resolved in that way throughout the generations. I mean, I find that really fascinating. But it's not. People might imagine it's like a channeling thing where you actually get in touch with your ancestors. You don't do that in a seance style, do you? Just so that people are clear.
No, not at all. You choose people from the group to represent your family members.
Yeah.
But as soon as you're given that role, it's strange how that you actually feel the things that they felt.
Wow.
And when you play, but it isn't as a seance or like a medium tuning into spirits or anything. It's much more practical than that. And when you place the people, you can see in the way that they are placed the web of relationships in that family, the dynamics in that family.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that would create quite an electric atmosphere in the room. How many people are in there? Is it as many as you need to map out your family? Usually
we're about 15 people in the room, something like that, 14, but you can do it with a small group of 8, or you can do it with one person. I sometimes work with just the client, and then you can use objects or cushions or stones, or
because the external representation, it sounds like, is the dynamic there. That makes, I was mentioning unresolved issues inside. When you unpack that or talk about it or represent it externally, something can change. Am I thinking along the right sort of lines there?
Yes, that's right.
Right. And sorry, go on.
Well, there are certain things that can affect a family that have a big impact, like emigration. Can have a big impact in the sense that a family can be completely split all over the world, and those that are left behind feel this huge sense of loss and grief, and those that go off have this deep sense of homesickness, maybe.
Oh, right. But
and especially if it's been through poverty that they had to move, or persecution that they had to leave.
Right, but that might have just been hanging there without people being able to distinguish the feeling. But when you map it out like that and you see that that's what's gone on, you can make sense of it, and it all falls into place. And you go, so that's why I feel like that, or that's why I behave in that way, or so on.
Like an early constellation I took part in, it's that there was this sense of trudging, that my feet were moving, and two other people next to me, I was in that constellation, I wasn't leading it, their feet were trudging, and there was this sense of being completely desolate and exhausted and totally weary. And it came out that person had the issue of not being able to find a home.
Really?
Hadn't been able to find her base, her roots, her home. And it turned out that her ancestor had been connected with the Lord of Argyll, that had been involved with all land clearances.
Oh, really? Right, okay.
So that information somehow came through.
Yes.
Hellinger called it the knowing field.
As in picking up on the knowing of our ancestors?
Yes, because often these things we don't know.
No.
And somehow, if you watch and wait with a constellation and let it unfold, it will basically reveal what stopped the flow of love in that family, or that sense of being at home or in your place.
Right, brilliant. Wonderful. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Is unblocking the flow of love.
That's right.
What are we here for otherwise?
Yes, that's right.
Brilliant. All right. Well, let's hear your first bit of music. Is this called Giant Leap?
Yes.
Right, okay. And why is this important to you? Or is it better to play it first and then discuss it afterwards?
Well, I thought it was... I often play it in the weekends. I use music a lot in the weekends.
Yeah.
And... but this one, it's comes from Australia, and it basically has that sense of the ancestors and the lines of ancestors.
Fantastic. Well, let's give it a listen. We'll be right back after this.
I'm the sum total of my ancestors. I carry their DNA. We are representatives of a long line of people, and we cart them around everywhere. This long line of people that goes back to the beginning of time. And when we meet, they meet other lines of people. And we say, bring together the lines of men.
Papa said we have to be wise to live long lives. Now I recognize what my father said before he dies. Vocalize things I've left unsaid. Left my spirit unfed for too long. I'm coming home to my family where I can be strong, be who I plan to be. Within me, my ancestry, giving me continuity. Would it be remiss to continue in this way? Would you rather I quit? Come with that other shit, making people hips.